Welcome to this episode of Forgiving the Girl Inside, a Matter of the Heart. I'm your host, Lisa Drennan, and today I have the beautiful Mona Ostrowski with us. She is a person who wears many hats, but first and foremost, she is a wife. She's been married for 21 years, has 3 almost grown children. Are our children ever grown? In our eyes, our babies are our babies. My baby is going to be 24 in a couple of days. But she has this beautiful journey of personal development. She has a passion that she has spent over a decade, a servant heart to help others. She has either as a nurse, massage therapist, or personal trainer, she has really connected with people's hearts and healing to become a self-development life coach, helping women who are victims of power abuse, either through a boss, teacher, family member, any of those outside relationships. So if you think about being wrapped in chains because somebody has this control over you because they're on a power trip, and you might be somebody who's kind of like introverted saying, I don't know what to say, and you lose your voice. So finding your voice to stand up for your beliefs and tell this bully, take a hike. So Mona, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your story. Tell us, what was life like before? What before you recognized this fact that you were being in this cycle of this abuse from these people in your life? What was that like?
Sure. It actually, looking back, it was I felt like I had a good life. Looking back on my childhood, I have very fond memories. Looking back at, growing up, I had a supportive family. Everything looked, very nice on the outside. And as a young person, a child or a teenager, even a young adult, you don't really recognize the toxicity that is there. This is just what you grew up with. This is what it was. And I was actually 35 years old when I realized that, hang on a minute, something is wrong here. I had my 3 children. At that time, I'd been married for 10 years. And all of a sudden, it was like, wait a minute, because I started making decisions in my life, decisions that didn't quite fit with the cultural and societal norm or where I came from or where I come from, which is Norway. One of them was I chose to homeschool my children because they were being severely bullied in school. And I was concerned. I was concerned for their well-being. And I wanted them to have a happy childhood full of play. And I believe sincerely that learning comes through play at any age, really. So me and my husband decided to take our kids out of school. And at the same time, we were on this health journey that just opened my eyes to the effect of what food has on our body, physically and mentally, which led us slowly but surely down to the decision of changing our diet from the normal carnivore Scandinavian, 90% meat, 10% vegetable diet to the opposite, no meat at all and only vegetables. And that kind of created some friction because people didn't want to understand that. So
It's something, a decision that you make for your family to
mhm.
consume something that's going to be healthy for your body, from a dietitian point of view, nutritional value, we know that we need those vegetables more than we need that protein. I mean, everything in balance, right? But for
Yep.
someone to say, oh, you can't eat that way, like, I'm sorry, those are not healthy boundaries. Like, whoa, who are you to
No.
tell me how to eat?
Yeah. And that's when I kind of had the wake up call because my family were like, they thought it was okay for them to continue to feed my children whatever they wanted, whereas I said, well, no, these are my decisions, these are my choices, and I would like for you to respect those choices. To which the answer was no, I don't respect your choices. And that kind of got me, wait a minute, Say what?
My blood's boiling right now. I'm like,
I know. I mean, I'm getting just, my hair is
you're like,
racing just thinking back because I know I have the image in my head of that exact moment. I almost remember what I was wearing. I know where I was standing, and I remember my whole posture. That's how clear that image is. And that was like, wait, if you can't respect my choices of living my life the way I want, then we have a problem here. And my upbringing, my family, like I said, very fond memories, but there was, zero to no communication. It was more like, this is the way we do it, all the unwritten laws and expectations. And so there was no venue to sit down and talk and say, hey, do you want to talk about this? Do you want to learn? Because I didn't make the decision to go vegan without doing my fair share of research. My husband and I spent every night, every evening, every spare time we had, we did researching, figuring out what is the best way to do this? How should we go about it? Is it safe to bring, to change the kids' diet? How do we move from this, what we have been doing for years, to what we want to achieve? And so, like, there was no avenue for me to say, hey, let's sit down and talk about this. And so, a few months passed, and this created a big rift in my relationship, which was primarily with my mom. And it got to a point where my husband and we decided that, okay, we wanted to take, we wanted to continue our lives with the decisions that we had made. And so we decided to move. We were living in Spain at the moment, so we decided to move to Australia, and we did, and everything was fine. And I can feel that my voice is starting to shake and my hands are starting to shake. Because after about a week of being in Australia, I get a phone call, you know, out of the blue. I didn't even, I mean, I think I only had my phone number for 2-3 days because of the transition between the two countries. And I get a phone call, and it's the Australian Child Protective Services that had received a complaint. And, we were like, okay. So we took the phone call and we talked to them, and that was really it. Unfortunately, living in Australia kind of didn't work out. This was post, the big breakup with my family and making the decision to move halfway across the country. And I think just being so far away from everything, and even though my husband is Australian, his family was there, it was just hard. And Australia is so big and everything is so far away, and there was so many decisions to be made.
Big change. So did you move because you wanted to be closer to your husband's family, or because you were trying to get away from your family?
We were trying to get away from my family, and that seemed like the furthest we could get away from them.
You won't listen to me and respect I'll show you.
Yeah.
So, but then
And
the adjustment, what was the adjustment like? I mean, like, I know, like, it was obviously different to navigate, and you had all those different experiences of, like, okay, things are further. And, did you feel like lonely? Did you feel guilty? What were the feelings that you had? I mean, you're not even there for 2 days. You get a phone call reporting you to Child Protective. And I totally get that. My mom reported me 7 times. It was like, what? And it was just really heartbreaking and frustrating, because it's like, yeah, you are not respecting my boundaries. And why, just because they can no longer control you, then they're going to try to hurt you. Right. So, I mean, what was your family going through? I mean, were you, I mean, I can imagine, were you like angry, a hot mess, or what were you like?
I can definitely say, hand on my heart, that I was a hot mess. And everything was happening at once. Where are we gonna live? Where are we gonna um where what are we gonna do for money? And we had worked for my family for the past over 10 years, so over a decade. We'd worked for my family, and we there was no salary. We worked for the with the expectation that we were gonna, build this property as a family, retreat, as a place for the family to get together and for everybody to have their own place. And we worked on the faith that at one point, we would all be together and share in, the profits of what this property could bring in. Uh, and my dad would send maybe a monthly salary or sum of money so that we could have for food. But with two adults working, it kind of didn't amount to anything huge. Anything we wanted to do was, okay, we want to go to Norway for Christmas. Okay, my mom and dad had to pay. So not only did I have that emotional codependency to my family, I was financially codependent as well. When we
Yeah.
left, I literally had $0. Like, I didn't have any money. We left. So that was also part of the reason why we went to my husband's family, because they could provide us a place to live, at least so we thought, until we got back on our feet. But after staying at my father-in-law's place for, it couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 weeks. I know you have to remember, we have to get our paperwork sorted out, all our what do you call it? Well, bureaucratic paperwork. My husband had to get his driver's license and all of these things back, and so everything takes time. Bureaucracy takes time. But after 3 weeks, my mother-in-law, or my stepmother-in-law, decides that she doesn't want us there anymore, so she kicks us out. And
Wow.
not only does she kick us out, she brings the police in. So we had 1 hour to pack our things up and leave their house. So that was like, not only did my children, live through the trauma of leaving what they saw as their childhood home, but once we got to Australia and we were trying to settle and set up a new place, like, all of a sudden we're homeless. All we have is our car. And luckily my sister-in-law was there, and she had a place where we could at least have some air mattresses and stay. So
Yeah.
what we did was, we're like, okay, let's make an adventure of this. Trying to stay positive, figuring out what our next step is going to be. So we bought a tent and some air mattresses, and we traveled around Australia for a week or so, just to clear our heads and figure out
Wow.
what our next steps were going to be. So
You had so many life changes happen at once. I mean, you left, I mean, just thinking about packing up, leaving one country that your kids especially were so used to, and then traveling to this new country, this new place, not really having a place to go, staying with the in-laws. And then I imagine that was chaotic just by the way you described how you had to leave.
yeah,
And then trying to be positive and upbeat and telling the kids, okay, yep, these are circumstances we have no control over right now, but let's take the positive out of it and let's make the best out of it. Let's make it an adventure. So I love how you help them see this, like, yeah, we're going to go on an adventure. We're going to camp. We got our mattresses, and,
yeah.
we got to figure this out. And having that support during that time, did you still like homeschool them and have them stay to a schedule, or was it more like a vacation type of atmosphere that you were promoting for them?
No, it became more of a vacation type of atmosphere where we were, I mean, travel, you learn all the time by traveling, right? You see different
Mm.
places, we look it up, we see different animals on the street, we talk about that. So there's always learning happening, but there was no there was
Set
no
schedule or anything,
schedule or anything. No, other than,
but really
okay, let's get
easing
up,
that
let's have
in.
breakfast, let's get on the road. Where are we going to today?
Yeah.
But I don't think, through the whole experience, I don't think that my kids ever felt homeless, you know? Uh, so,
And
but
it's good you
any,
didn't project that onto them because you were feeling homeless. And
you know
I
what?
can't
It
even
didn't occur
imagine
to me
being
until
washed.
like, didn't occur to me until like probably 10 years later. And I'm like, oh wait, we were actually homeless for a period then.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
because
can't
it
even
was
imagine, like, what was it like to have the police escort you out of someplace that you thought was going to be safe for you to get on your feet and get established in this, new country?
uh it it was it was stressful, I think. But more than anything, the police officers didn't want to do what they were supposed to do. Like they were like, we don't want to put a family of five out on the streets. And
Mm.
they asked my stepmother-in-law, like, can you leave? Can you go and visit your daughter in Sydney for a week so that to give these guys an opportunity to find somewhere else to live? Can you do anything? She's like, no, this is my house, and they need to leave. So it was like you just got to do what you got to do. Like I didn't feel like there was any time to think or anything. It was like, okay, we're not welcome here anymore. Now we move on. What's the next best thing? Okay, we do have a place. It's my sister-in-law's house, so we stayed there. But it was that's when you started thinking, okay, how are we gonna do this? How are we gonna get to a place where we can build ourselves up? So we actually made the decision to move back to Europe, which uh, it felt right at the moment. Like I felt more secure in that decision. I didn't decide to move back to Norway. We decided to move to Denmark. And we had some friends in Denmark that helped us. And through staying with them for a couple of months, I was able to find a job. We were able to buy a house, and we were getting to a point where, okay, now we feel uh, now we feel like we're moving in the right direction at least.
What's
But
the time span for this that you're doing all this moving? Is it like within a few months or?
yeah, this happened very very quickly. Moved halfway across the street to the world, to Australia and back to Europe in like a five 5 week to 2 month span. Yeah. So
Wow, that's a huge life change. That's like, they talk about the different life events that are stressful. Getting
yeah.
married, buying a home, and retiring, right? And just moving. I've been in the same home we've been here since 1991. So what is that, 30 years?
Yep.
30,
Yep.
32 years? I don't even know. I don't do math in my head, but yeah, the thought of even packing and moving my stuff. I mean, we're getting ready to move in a couple of years, and I think about all the stuff that we have that we've collected over the 30-year period, and I'm like, ugh, just
Let's
packing a
just say
box or a suitcase.
we've become minimalists in
I was
our
like,
yeah. We The only thing that I have that is really important to me are all my photos and my albums. And then I have some knickknacks that I've inherited from grandparents and things like that. So if I was to move, everything can stay. Piece of furniture, I can buy it somewhere. But my photos and my knickknacks, that's what create my home. So that's what
yeah,
always comes with me. So I have the ability to move from place to place within, I think, 10 boxes or something. So
that's
everything
good. Do you
else I
have a
can
van?
buy.
You must have one of those extended vans, right?
Right. Uh, but yeah, so we moved to Denmark, and I got a job, and we bought a house. And but it wasn't more than a few weeks after arriving in Denmark where to which I got another letter from the CPS, from the Child Protective Services. So first in Australia, then in Denmark. And since we knew that, we believed that we were going to stay, and we bought a house. So we went to the meeting, and we got completely bombarded. It was,
Wow.
it was like claim after claim that we didn't understand, that we didn't know. And in Denmark, you have access to your files. So I asked for the access to the files and what was in them. And when I opened the file, I saw that every single family member from my side of the family had written something. And it was painful to read. People that saw my family once, maybe twice a year for a couple of hours, had an opinion on my kids and the well-being of my kids. People that maybe didn't even like see them, once a year, had an opinion on the well-being of my children. And it
All
was
because you
hard.
fed them vegetables.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what it turned out to be, when you started reading in between the lines, that it had nothing to do with the vegetables, it had nothing to do with the homeschooling. It had everything to do with the fact that they didn't appreciate my husband and, the person that he is. My husband of now 21 years, who for me has done nothing but encourage and motivate me to become the best version of myself and actually be myself and not some expectation of what a person should be, but
Right.
actually live and be my true authentic self. But because he didn't want to conform, because he didn't want to become Norwegian, uh, it it became a personal war against him. So
Wow.
we went to the first meeting and we were completely bombarded to a point where we had an interpreter there because everything was happening in Danish. So we had an interpreter and she came in and she's like, I am so sorry you had to go through that. Like, that was ridiculous. And so learning about, the system and everything, we started, fighting back. We're like, if you want us to come to a meeting, we want to know what the meeting is about. And if you want to do this, then, yes, we will comply, but I want this. And it never happened. So it ended up with my house. It was, I think, a Sunday, and I was sitting in the living room and I saw people walking towards my house. And I was like, oh shit. I grabbed my kids, I put them in the bathroom and I hid. And all of a sudden I hear them inside my house. So they found a way to get inside my house. So I locked the kids up in the bathroom and I walked out into the living room and I said, you got to leave. This is private property. You have nothing in here to do. You got to leave. You got to leave me and my children alone. It was 4 social workers and 2 police officers. And they're
How
like,
did
no,
they
we're not
get
gonna.
permission to come in? Was that permissible
They didn't.
in that?
They just took it. They
Wow.
found a key because we had some tenants that had a spare key. So these tenants gave them the key and they opened the door and they went into my house. And uh, yeah, four social workers and 2 police officers. And they're like, we're not leaving until we see the kids. So I'm like, okay. So I opened, I went to the bathroom. Kids were already dressed. They were telling me just the other day when we were talking about it, like they'd been looking around the bathroom, figuring out places where they can hide inside the cabinets, inside the bathtub, inside the shower. My eldest daughter said I was ready to just take my siblings and jump out the window and run away.
Yeah, were they afraid that they were going to be taken from you? Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
I can't even imagine that feeling that, wow.
No. So they came out. So the children sat down at a table with 2 social workers having to draw some houses and things like that. I sat down with the other 2 social workers trying to explain that, listen, this has got nothing to do with the welfare of my children. This is my mom, trying to take my children away from me. And the police officers were blocking the door. So there was no way for me and the children to leave, even if we wanted to. And they spent half an hour with my kids. And within half an hour, we were told that they were extremely concerned with our children and the well-being of our children. They wanted them to go to therapy, and my husband and I needed to go in front of a board of people. And at the moment, we'd already uh, planned a trip to America to go traveling, do a road trip across America. So they gave us permission to do that. And while we're on this trip, we call a lawyer here in the US that work with families of homeschooling families across not only the US but Europe as well. And we had a call with the lawyer, and he's like, whatever you do, when you leave the US, don't go back to Denmark. If they get your kids, that's it. So we did go back to Denmark. We didn't have a choice. We went back to Denmark. I had been relocated for my job, so we were moving anyway. So we got back to Denmark at about 9 o'clock in the evening. We went home. We spent 3 hours packing our house, just packing, rented the biggest, car I could find. I packed all of my 10 boxes of knickknacks and albums. And we started driving to Italy that same night. The goal was to get over the border between Denmark and Germany so that we were out of Denmark. And that was probably 7 years ago. That's 7 years ago.
Wow, what a story. My goodness, you have to write a book. This has got to be a movie.
I know.
That's crazy though. I mean, just to have to go through that, and I can't even imagine the children, regardless of their ages, what they were feeling in that fear of, like what is going on. And I can't even imagine the doubt that must have gone through their head that they were told, like we were told so many lies.
Yeah.
And having that from your own family, just because they didn't like the fact that you didn't conform. And I know there's a lot of families out there that are very controlling. And if you don't conform, then they cut you off. They do this, they do that. And you don't think it happens, but it does happen. And a lot of people keep it hush hush. They don't want to talk about that because you want to protect. And I know a couple of weeks ago, we had talked about that, like protecting the other people because you don't want that to be rehashed, but sharing your story is so healing. And I know the more you share this, the more healing, and your mission to help others in this cycle of abuse. It's so powerful because I would imagine the little girl inside of you is like, well, this is my mom and dad. These are my siblings. These are my cousins. This is my family, my blood.
Yep.
And the ties are so strong biologically, but you knew there was a disconnect. And like to make that decision and say, you know what, I've had enough. I have a voice. And to have your husband supporting you and being empowered. And I'm sure he has his own story that's beautiful. And the two of you will come together someday and write that book so you can help families, because this is a real thing. And I know a lot of families are tied under that, and people use money as a form to get you to do, and
Oh, absolutely.
I always like the movies, the stories of the rich people who tell their families, buzz off. I don't need your money. I'm going to go make my own. Gilmore Girls is one of the stories that reminds me of that.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
it is. It's so powerful, and I have to say, I can feel your story. Like my body is just really responding to this. Stop controlling me, and I'm like, I can relate to it because my mom called child abuse on me 7 times when I was a young mom, and it's like, I am not abusing my kid. Yeah, I was angry and frustrated, but I was doing the best I can, and I'm definitely not hurting my child.
Yeah.
So to be accused of that, especially from your own mom, dads don't play a part in it so much. It sounds like your dad didn't play too much of a part because he was giving you money, but
the
they have a
dads,
different
in the background, even though they're not complicit. I mean, I'm not going to say my dad was innocent either, because when this whole thing turned out, I remember, being in the car with him, and he's like, Mona, why don't you just divorce your husband and move back to Norway with me and your mom? I was like, I was 35 years old. I'd been married for 10 years. I had three children. That wasn't the solution. The solution was, hey, let's sit down and talk about this. Let me explain to you the reasons why I'm choosing to remove meat from my kids' diet. Let's sit down and talk. Your husband was
like brainwashing you?
Yeah.
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 Wow. And to me, I almost take offense of that, or you should take offense that you actually think that, because you raised me to be a strong individual woman. So why can I not stand up towards my husband? Is it because you don't expect me to stand up to you, so therefore I don't have the ability to stand up to my husband?
Yeah.
But my husband
Yeah.
encourages me to stand up to him. My husband encourages me to fight. I hadn't had a raised voice fight my whole life until I met my husband. And slowly but surely, he taught me how to fight. And that's healthy in a relationship. You cannot bottle everything up.
Right.
You need to express it. Okay, maybe you don't have to scream your head off like I used to do, but I never had that venue to express my feelings growing up. Like my anger was slamming doors, and then
Yeah.
I got teased for it. So then it's like, oh, my feelings are not valid because they're teasing me for being angry. So I'm not allowed to be angry. But you are. Anger is a part of being a human.
Yeah.
And the problem comes when we don't express the anger. That's when it
So
sets in your
important.
body
Yeah.
through disease or other things. And so that was annoying like hell when my husband wanted to fight with me, but it was also so refreshing
Yeah.
to have, to be allowed to
Sometimes you just need
scream
a
and
good
be angry.
scream. I haven't screamed in a long time. I used to scream a lot when I was younger, my younger years, when I wasn't able to identify emotions, and I didn't even know what emotions were until my favorite movie Inside Out came out. I watched it in 2016, and I'm like, those are emotions. Okay, I get
Mhm.
it now. How do I identify those? And even now, even as a when I go through my hardcore process, it's like, okay, how am I feeling? What's that feeling? And I have to actually look it up because
Yeah,
I quickly identify, is it frustration? Is it anger? Is it, resentment? And you're so right. The body keeps the score. I'm reading that
yeah,
book. I've read parts of it, but I decided to read the whole thing. And our body does know, and our body knows before it connects to our mind, and we take action
yeah,
based on that. And the triggers are powerful. I can't even imagine the triggers that you still have to process and recognize so that you can safely use your voice and establish those healthy boundaries. So you've been in the US for 7 years, you said?
4 years, yeah.
4 years. Okay. So have you reconciled with your family?
So uh, I've had some conversations with my sister. I have had my brother doesn't want to talk to me, and my father, um, you know, couple of text messages connected on social media because when we left Denmark, I I I I deleted everything. I deleted my Facebook. I deleted, we went completely under the radar because I didn't want my mom to know where I was so that she could come again. And I didn't feel safe. So we kept under the radar for probably 3 years in Italy until I was like, wait a minute, this is not fair. I'm not living my life. I'm not I'm not being me. I love to hang out with people. I enjoy, certain aspects, but I enjoy social media and sharing and seeing what people are up to. And I like sharing, my life with others, but I'm not being myself. And this is not fair because, she made a decision that yeah, I don't even know why she made the decision. I'm sure she had a good reason, and in many aspects, I have actually forgiven her. But the process
Next
that I'm
question.
working, yeah, the process that I'm working on this year is
Mhm.
forgiving myself for making the decisions that I made. I've had conversations with my children. I've asked my children for forgiveness, and they all have. And I have within myself, I've forgiven her. I've forgiven my mom. I've forgiven my dad. Uh, and my process this year is just forgiving myself for being blind, forgiving myself for forgiving myself for reacting,
Mhm. Yeah.
forgiving. I don't believe in what ifs, but and I can't regret. I made decisions that I thought was correct under the circumstances, and in within the awareness that I had at the time. So I cannot go back. I cannot be mad at myself for making the decisions that I made. I can only accept them and forgive
Agreed.
myself for having made them, because I do feel like I am carrying a lot of anger in my body, and I feel in my core that it's not serving me anymore. It might have served me back then to give me the anger and the fuel that I needed to step in and get this job that I have, and do well within the job and survive. And but now, where I am now, I want to thrive. I want to continue building my life. And for that to happen, I need to let go of this anger. And I read, um, let's see if I can find it, because I was doing some Bible study, which is completely new to me as well. And in Romans 12:19, it says, "Dearly beloved, avenge not yourself, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, said the Lord." So for me to, and I'm getting goosebumps again, for me to read that was like, okay, so I can let go. I can actually let go of this anger. It's not mine to hold anymore. Somebody else will take care of it. Vengeance is not mine, it's his.
Yeah.
And that is part of my journey. That's where I'm at now. I spent last year learning to just love myself, or at least accept myself for who I am. And this year it's all about, okay, let's let go of this anger. Let's
Yeah.
forgive
That's beautiful.
myself.
And
Yeah.
it's, once you can grieve it and let go of it, it just releases you. And you talked about having those chains, like breaking the chains, and that's exactly what it's going to do. It's going to freely break all of those chains. So if you picture yourself just wrapped, I mean, I just picture it from head to toe, and the lock, the keypads are everywhere. And then
Mm-hmm.
slowly, as you release it, you let it go. And you can never go back and change the circumstances, but you can get your new perspective and see what was the good that came out of it. How did it help you
Mm-hmm.
grow? And, what we're like focusing on the adventures and all the things that you got to teach your children, and knowing that that's not the type of person you wanted to be. You didn't want to be this docile person who, basically was a bobblehead to your family and let them control you. And, just because our parents raised us and provided for us as a young child doesn't mean we're supposed to control them. And, one of the things that our parents teach us is independence. But then when we take our independence, they're like, oh, no, you can't do that. And yeah, and I imagine lots of families. I mean, I don't know what the divorce rate is, but I imagine if you were still that little girl, that docile child, having that conversation with your dad, you would said, "Okay, Dad, I'm going to leave him because the family doesn't like him." And, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I see all these faults in him. I imagine that's why a lot of people get divorced, because they're so influenced by what others tell them, especially their family members,
Yeah.
and like, oh, well, I'm just going to get a divorce because he doesn't fit in and I was too young when I married him and blah, blah, blah. And for you to stand up for yourself and say, you know what? No, this is not congruent to who I am, who I've become, stepping into your own identity, into your own self. So I applaud you. That is just a beautiful journey to be able to have that strength. And, I can't even, I mean, I know the cutting off those ties and setting those healthy, it's like, yes, you are strong, you are powerful, you are designed for such a time as this. And it's beautiful, beautiful journey. So I'm excited for you to step into I know you're rebranding. We talked about that before we came on live. We're all about
Yeah.
rebranding and just getting into
Yes, we
our niche and
are.
serving who we're called to serve, because you can't broaden that any longer. You really got to get connected. And I know you're going to be connecting with women who are in the same cycle,
Yes.
codependent, especially with their moms. And it could be, you're talking about bosses, friendships. There's a
Yeah.
lot of controlling friends. A lot of people have these relationships that they know aren't right. It in your heart, but you're not quite sure. You don't have that voice to express it. So you're going to be helping with that. What's the best way for the audience to get a hold of you, to connect with you?
So the best way to reach me is really through Facebook or Instagram. My Facebook page is Coach Mona Ostrowski, and it's the same on Instagram. So look me up, and they want to, have a chat to discuss, controlling moms or family members, or maybe a narcissistic boss that doesn't recognize you and your talent and silences you every time you try to speak up, please just book a time, and we'll sit down and talk. I would love to chat with you and hear your story.
Absolutely. And we'll throw those links in the description so they can easily access them. And if you know anyone who is in need of Mona services, please share this video with them, have them reach out to her, because you need to realize you're not alone. And once you can speak your
Absolutely.
voice, you can get the healing that you need. You can go back and heal that little girl inside, so that you can do what you're called to be. So thank you again, Mona, for sharing your story. And thank you for whoever here is listening. Um, Remember, mindset is the crux of all that we do. It's a matter of the heart.